Hello, S1. This non-fiction close reading video lesson is going to combine some of the skills that you've been practicing in your literacy lessons with some of the textual analysis work that you've been doing with myself. And we're going to be looking at some extracts from the writer Maya Angelou. Maya Angelou was born in 1928 and sadly passed away in 2014. She was a poet and civil rights activist. She published 7 autobiographies, 3 books of essays, several books of poetry, and is credited with a list of plays, movies, and television shows spanning over 50 years. She received dozens of awards, with more than 50 honorary degrees to her name. She's best known for her series of 7 autobiographies, and they focus on her childhood and early adult experiences. The first one, I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings, from 1969, tells of her life up to the age of 17 and brought her international recognition and acclaim. She became a poet and a writer after a string of odd jobs during her young adulthood. She was active in the civil rights movement and worked with both Martin Luther King Jr. and Malcolm X. With the publication of that first autobiography, I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings, Angelou publicly discussed aspects of her personal life for the first time, and she was a respected spokesperson for Black people and women. And her books centre on the themes such as racism, identity, family, and travel. So we're going to look at an extract today, first of all, from I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings. And here she describes her childhood with her grandmother in the American South of the 1930s. So first, I'm going to read over the extract across the next 2 slides. I'd just like you to read along with me, please. One Christmas, we received gifts from our mother and father, who lived separately in a heaven called California, where we were told they could have all the oranges they could eat. And the sun shone all the time. I was sure that wasn't so. I couldn't believe that our mother would laugh and eat oranges in the sunshine without her children. Until that Christmas, when we received the gifts, I had been confident that they were both dead. I could cry any time I wanted by picturing my mother, I didn't quite know what she looked like, lying in her coffin. Her hair, which was black, was spread out on a tiny little white pillow, and her body was covered with a sheet. The face was brown like a big O, and since I couldn't fill in the features, I printed Mother across the O, and tears would fall down my cheeks like warm milk. Then came that terrible Christmas, with its awful presents, when our father, with the vanity I was to find typical, sent his photograph. My gift from Mother was a tea set, a teapot, 4 cups and saucers and tiny spoons, and a doll with blue eyes and rosy cheeks and yellow hair painted on her head. I didn't know what Bailey received, but after I opened my boxes, I went out to the backyard behind the chinaberry tree. The day was cold and the air as clear as water. Frost was still on the bench, but I sat down and cried. I looked up and Bailey was coming from the outhouse, wiping his eyes. He had been crying too. I didn't know if he had also told himself they were dead and had been rudely awakened to the truth, or whether he was just feeling lonely. The gifts opened the door to questions that neither of us wanted to ask. Why did they send us away? And what did we do wrong? So wrong. Okay, so what's going to happen next is I'm going to take you through a series of 7 questions about this extract. So what you'll need in front of you is either a pen and paper or a Word document opened up so that you can type your answers into it. Whichever works best for you is fine. The question and a bit of the extract will appear on the screen. And then when I ask you to, you should pause the video to write down your answer. Then once you're happy with your answer, press play again on the video and you'll get the answer. And you should self-assess your answer. So check your answer against the marking scheme when it appears on the screen. Do not be tempted to just watch the video straight through and just write down the answers because you're not really doing yourself any favours there, okay? It's all about practice. So we will be pausing when the time comes, I hope. So let's have a little look at the first question. It says, explain why the writer calls California a heaven. So here in purple is the extract again. One Christmas we received gifts from our mother and father, who lived separately in a heaven called California, where we were told they could have all the oranges they could eat and the sun shone all the time. I was sure that wasn't so. So for question 1, you have to explain why the writer calls California a heaven. What is heaven? What is a heaven? And why would she call California heaven? Okay, so if you press pause now, as you can see the little logo there, and then when you're ready, come back. Okay, so why does the writer call California heaven? Well, here is our answer here. The writer calls California a heaven because heaven is seen as somewhere blissful, somewhere out of reach, and she believes California sounds too good to be true. So this idea that they could have all the oranges they could eat, to the young Maya Angelou, this seemed like just a crazy, blissful, heavenly-like dream. It couldn't possibly be true. Okay, question 2 says, explain in your own words why the writer finds it hard to believe that her mother lives there. So again, the extract. One Christmas we received gifts from our mother and father who lived separately in a heaven called California, where we were told they could have all the oranges they could eat, and the sun shone all the time. I was sure that wasn't so. I couldn't believe that our mother would laugh and eat oranges in the sunshine without her children. Now keep an eye, because it says explain in your own words. So when you see that, remember, you can't just copy down word for word what it says in the passage. You have to try and express the answer using different words, different language. So obviously the last sentence in that extract there, the sentence that starts, I couldn't believe, is the one that we're looking at. So have a look at that and see if you can put into your own words why the writer finds it hard to believe that her mother lives there. Okay, we're going to pause the video now. Okay, so let's have a little look at the answer. She can't believe her mother would enjoy herself and have fun if she did not have her kids with her. So I've not just said would laugh and eat oranges. I've said would enjoy herself and have fun, because they kind of mean the same thing. If she's laughing, she's probably enjoying herself and having fun. If she's eating oranges, that sounds like she's enjoying herself and having fun. So I've said that. And I have said she did not have her kids with her. So I've not used the word children, I've used the word kids instead, to show that I'm using my own words and that I understand what these words mean, because I can use other words to substitute for it. Let's go on to question 3. Why did the writer believe that her parents were dead? I couldn't believe that our mother would laugh and eat oranges in the sunshine without her children. Until that Christmas, when we received the gifts, I had been confident that they were both dead. I could cry any time I wanted by picturing my mother. I didn't quite know what she looked like, lying in her coffin. So press pause now. Okay, so we're ready for the answer now. Hopefully you've written something down. Why did the writer believe that her parents were dead? The writer believed that her parents were dead because she had not heard from them until the gifts arrived at Christmas time. So clearly these Christmas presents was the first time that she had heard from her mum and dad at all. So she was perhaps thinking that they had passed away, or that's why she hadn't heard from them. Why else would they not have been in touch? Let's have a look at question 4. In your own words, what 2 reasons does the author suggest for her brother's tears? Frost was still on the bench, but I sat down and cried. I looked up and Bailey was coming from the outhouse, wiping his eyes. He had been crying too. I didn't know if he has also told himself they were dead and had been rudely awakened to the truth, or whether he was just feeling lonely. So we're looking for 2 different things here, 2 different answers, 2 different reasons. And we want to say them in our own words. So that bit there where it says he was feeling lonely, we don't want to say lonely. Let's try and find a better word, a different word for lonely when we're answering it. He's told himself they were dead and had been rudely awakened to the truth. What's maybe a simpler way of saying that instead of just writing it word for word? Have a go, press pause now. Okay, so let's have a look at the answer on the screen and compare it to your answer. The author suggests her brother was sad because he also thought their parents had passed away and was shocked that they were alive. Another reason could be that he felt abandoned or had no one to talk to. So, put it into my own words, I've not said told himself that they were dead, I've said passed away instead of dead. Instead of rudely awakened to the truth, I've said he was shocked that they were alive. And then instead of lonely, I've mentioned him feeling abandoned or having no one to talk to. So have a little look at your answer, compare it. Remember, your answer doesn't have to be exactly the same as the one on the screen. But as long as it's kind of like it, you're doing the right thing. Let's have a look at question 5. In your own words, what does the author remember about the weather on that day? I didn't know what Bailey received, but after I opened my boxes, I went out to the backyard behind the chinaberry tree. The day was cold and the air was as clear as water. Frost was still on the bench, but I sat down and cried. So once again, we don't want to use the words of the passage. So there's big words in there like cold or air as clear as water, frost. So we don't want to use them. We want to come up with our own words. So press pause now and see how you get on. Okay, time for the answer. The author remembered that the weather was chilly and icy. It's as simple as that. Instead of cold, I've said chilly. Instead of frost, I've said icy. I've used my own words and I've answered the question correctly. So see how yours match up. Like I said, it doesn't have to be exactly the same as this one. As long as it's something like that, then you can give yourself a tick. Let's look at question 6. Explain in your own words the effect that the presents from their parents have on the children. He had been crying too. I didn't know if he has also told himself they were dead and had been rudely awakened to the truth, or whether he was just feeling lonely. The gifts opened the door to questions that neither of us wanted to ask. Why did they send us away? And what did we do wrong? So wrong. So, in our own words, what is the effect of these presents on these two kids? How are they feeling? Explain how they're feeling, but in your own words, not the words that are there on the screen. Okay, press pause now and have a go. Okay, so time for the answer. The present started to make the children wonder why they had not heard from the parents before, if they had done something bad to deserve that treatment. So those questions, the rhetorical questions at the end, why did they send us away? What did we do wrong? So wrong. That's what we're focusing in on here. So they're wondering, they're asking questions, why have they not heard from them before? And had they done something bad? Instead of something wrong, I said something bad. I put it into my own words. Okay, question 7 then is a vocab question. So, using a dictionary if you have one, or Googling, can you find the meanings of these 3 words? Vanity, outhouse, and typical. I'll pause now while you do that. Okay, so the answers for this section here. Vanity means that you're obsessed with yourself. An outhouse is a small shed or barn outside the main house that may contain the toilet. And typical is when something is characteristic or usual of something, perhaps an event or a person. Right, next we're going to go on and have a look at a different extract from Maya Angelou. So this is also from I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings. And in this extract, Maya Angelou is remembering spending the night in an old abandoned car in a junkyard. I spent the day wandering aimlessly through the bright streets. The noisy penny arcades with their gaggle-giggle of sailors and children and the games of chance were tempting, but after walking through one of them it was obvious that I could only win more chances and no money. I went to the library and used a part of my day reading science fiction, and in its marble washroom I changed my bandage. On one flat street I passed a junkyard, littered with the carcasses of old cars. The dead hulks were somehow so uninviting that I decided to inspect them. As I wound my way through the discards, a temporary solution sprang to my mind. I would find a clean or cleanish car and spend the night in it. With the optimism of ignorance, I thought that the morning was bound to bring a more pleasant solution. A tall-bodied grey car near the fence caught my eye. Its seats were untorn, and although it had no wheels or rims, it sat evenly on its fenders. The idea of sleeping in the near open bolstered my sense of freedom. I was a loose kite in a gentle wind, floating with only my will for an anchor. After deciding upon the car, I got inside and ate the tuna sandwiches, and then searched the floorboards for holes. The fear that rats might scurry in and eat off my nose as I slept, some cases had been recently reported in the papers, was more alarming than the shadowed hulks in the junkyard or the quickly descending night. My grey choice, however, seemed rat-tight, and I abandoned my idea of taking another walk and decided to sit steady and wait for sleep. So, Question 1, again, on this second passage. So it says to pick out one word from the beginning of the passage that tells you that the author had no definite plans that day. So she said, I spent the day wandering aimlessly through the bright streets. The noisy penny arcades with their gaggle-giggle of sailors and children and the games of chance were tempting. But after walking through one of them, it was obvious that I could only win more chances and no money. So have a look at that and write down one word, so one word answer, that tells us she had no definite plans that day. Pause now. Okay, and the answer is aimlessly. She's wandering aimlessly. If you wander with no aim, you're wandering aimlessly, you have no definite plan. She doesn't know where she was going. She was just wandering around aimlessly. So, question 2. The author describes the junkyard as being littered with the carcasses of old cars. Name the figure of speech used here and explain why it is effective. Figure of speech, another word that we sometimes use for that, is imagery. So, littered with the carcasses of old cars, is that a simile, metaphor, personification? And why is it a good example? Could we use the just as, so to explain what qualities of one thing allow us to learn something about the quality of something else? What's the comparison that's there? This is quite a tricky one, so give yourself some time and pause now to try and answer. Okay, so our answer here, it's personification. So the comparison being made is carcasses and old cars. So there's a metaphorical edge to it here. So a carcass is a dead animal, and all the useful bits have been removed. So just as carcasses are dead animals, all the useful bits removed, so too are the cars, the rotten remains of what they used to be. So you might get like the carcass of a turkey at the end of your Christmas dinner, and now that's all that's left of the cars. It's just the shell. There's not really much use left there. So it's a tricky bit of imagery to analyse. But if you weren't really sure, don't worry, that's probably one of the harder questions on this video lesson, so don't beat yourself up too much about it. Question 3, explain in your own words why she decides to go and look more closely at the old cars. The dead hulks were somehow so uninviting that I decided to inspect them. As I wound my way through the discards, a temporary solution sprang to mind. I would find a clean or cleanish car and spend the night in it. With the optimism of ignorance, I thought that the morning was bound to bring a more pleasant solution. So again, own words. Try and not use any of the words that are there in purple. Try and write your answer without using those words. And if you find yourself about to use one of the words, try and find another word for it. Use, again, a thesaurus online and look for other words that mean the same thing. Pause now and have a go. So your answer here, the writer looks closely at the old cars because she needed somewhere to sleep that night. So that's all it was. Spend the night in is what she says, and in our own words we could say needed somewhere to sleep that night. So that works. In our own words, your answer might not be exactly the same, but as long as you didn't say, spend the night, then you're doing fine, because that wouldn't have been your own words. That would be the words of the passage. Question number 4 then. What does the word temporary mean? Choose from the following options. Does it mean A, good, B, short term, or C, safe? So she's talking about staying in the car that night as a temporary thing. Does it mean it's a good thing, a short term thing, or a safe thing? Hit pause now. So your answer is B, short term. If something's temporary, it means it's only happening for a little period of time. It definitely doesn't sound like it's a good or safe situation for her to be in. So if you weren't really sure, maybe that would help you work it out. Question 5 then. The writer says, I was a loose kite in a gentle wind, floating with only my will for an anchor. Name the figure of speech used and explain why it is effective. So once again, figure of speech is just another way of saying imagery. So simile, metaphor, or personification. Write down which one it is. And then can you explain, perhaps using the just as, so to formula, why is it an effective one? What does it tell us when we're comparing these two things, the two things that are being compared by the figure of speech, by the imagery? Again, these are tricky, so take your time with it. Press pause now to have a go. Okay, so the answer is it's a metaphor. I was a loose kite, not I was like a loose kite, but I was one, a definite comparison. Just as a kite will go wherever the wind takes it, so too will the writer go wherever she likes that evening. She's a loose kite, she's blowing around in the wind, and she'll just go wherever her evening takes her. So, question 6 then. What is the writer's main concern as she gets into the car? After deciding upon the car, I got inside and ate the tuna sandwiches and then searched the floorboards for holes. The fear that rats might scurry in and eat off my nose as I slept, some case had been recently reported in the papers, was more alarming than the shadowed hulks in the junkyard or the quickly descending night. Okay, so press pause and have a go. So your answer here, the writer's main concern is that vermin will attack her in the night as she sleeps in the car. Now, this didn't say own words, but I thought maybe I'd test myself a little bit and find another word for rats. So vermin works there. But if you said rats, that's okay. Don't worry about that. Question 6 up next then. Find out the meaning of carcasses, hulks, uninviting, discards, temporary, optimism, fenders, and bolstered. So there's a list of words there. I'd like you to go and either, once again, use your dictionary or use Google and write down the definitions of all of these words. I'm going to pause the video now, and I'll see you in a moment. So your answers then are here. Carcasses, we talked about this already, the dead body of an animal. Hulks. Now, some of you might have gone in a different direction. It's definitely not the Marvel character. Hulks could be referring to an old ship that's been stripped of the fittings. So that might make sense in a junkyard. Or maybe some of you might have gone for the definition of a hulk, just been something really large, and maybe you think that she's referring to the cars as being large. Both of those are fine. Uninviting is something that's not attractive. It doesn't really make you want to go there. Discards could mean to throw something away, or it's something useless. It depends on how it's being used. If it's a verb, I discard something, it means you're throwing it away. If you're talking about, the discards, the stuff that's been thrown away, you're maybe talking about something that's useless. Temporary, we've talked about that already as well. It lasts for a limited time. Optimism means feeling positive. Fenders, quite tricky, bit of an American term. It's the wheel frame on a car. So she talks about the car resting on its fender. So its wheels have been taken away, and it's basically just resting on the rim of the wheel. So that's what a fender is. And bolstered means something that's been padded with support. So it can mean a couple of different things, though. You could literally bolster a seat by adding a cushion to it, and that's a padded support. But you can also talk about bolstered in a different way. You can say that you've bolstered someone's confidence by giving them a little bit of positive contribution and to how they're feeling, that kind of thing. So it could go either way. There. So hopefully you're quite happy with your answers for all of the questions that you have done. There is one more task for you to do, and I will have hopefully spoken to you about this in the live call, as long as that worked. And that is to go to your assignments page and open up the assignment that's related to this task. It will be called My Angelou. And what it asks you to do is to fill out a Microsoft form using the vocabulary words that you've learned today. So the words from this section, and then also the 3 words from the previous section. It's going to ask you to successfully use all those words in a sentence. So, to finish off, I thought this was a good quote from Maya Angelou to finish off. She said, "I've learned that no matter what happens or how bad it seems today, life does go on and it will be better tomorrow." So I'm not talking about doing close reading, obviously. I'm talking about the lockdown and the hopes that we'll all be back together in class eventually soon. So if you're in my class, then please check your teams for that assignment and fill out the form with your vocabulary words. And if you have any questions about any of the work that you've completed related to this video, then please post in Teams and let me know. Thanks, guys.